Frowning, he shouted, saying that for the safety of Her Highness's territory, they must get rid of them. The mages charged the knight's swords. Then they rushed to the attack. Many warriors began to attack the lying insects. The orc, holding a stake in his hands, shouted loudly. He plunged it into the bodies of several creatures. After a while, the orcs roasted their meat over a fire, joyfully exulting. One of them bit off the cooked flesh. The entire tribe raised their hands, noting that they now had protein. One orc turned around when a girl approached him and called him. In her hand, she clutched a small flower. The guy looked at him with surprised eyes when she began to thank him for covering her. He looked after her. A blush appeared on his cheeks. The brown-haired man sat on the ground, hearing the loud screams of his parents. The father grabbed him by the shoulders, asking if he had been there earlier and if something hurt. He answered that he was fine. The parents began to hug him, and the man said that he was sorry, but at the same time he was so grateful because he saved everyone on this miserable father's land. The woman began to ask why he liked to sacrifice himself so much and asked what they would do if he got hurt. Sweat appeared on the protagonist's tired face when he mentally noted that everything was not like that at all and that he worked like that for his sweet pension and all purely for his own benefit. When the administrator laughed, he indignantly asked why he was laughing. The administrator said that it seemed that he did not remember at all what he said at the end of the final spoiler. The guy mentally asked what he said there anyway. While he was still sitting with his parents, the administrator suggested forgetting about it. He did not remember anything anyway. The protagonist mentally noted that he didn't care anymore because from now on they had even more work to do and they needed to prepare for the second wave. The system noted that he had received a new title, Insect Bounty Hunter number 1. His coverage area was the Frontera estate and the Lacona estate. The duration was 110 years, and the CP accrual for the title was 2. The effects of the title were that just looking at an insectoid monster would instill fear in him, and under the monsters area, they would immediately become weak and lose their fighting strength. At night, Lloyd was standing outside with a shovel. He turned around when someone approached him. In front of him stood the commander of the White Knights, Beladi Blank, and asked why he was called. The guy bowed to him and thanked him for responding to his request, and then thanked him for helping him fight the locusts. He raised his head when the blonde asked him to stop beating around the bush because everyone knew perfectly well who played the main role in this story. The brown-haired man told him not to take it to heart because it was a purge, and if they tried to cope with it on their own, it would have taken weeks, but thanks to the help, they only needed a day. The protagonist's eyes widened when he told him that, to be honest, at first he was very angry, and although he was a simple engineer, he received the right to control the White Warriors. The knight frowned, saying that however, having arrived here, he realized that their arrival time and location were carefully calculated. He noted that Lloyd was an outstanding strategist, and saving the queen was also not a simple coincidence. Looking at the puzzled face opposite, Blank added that all this, it hurt his pride, the magicians were released, and they are all here for him, for whom it would be an honor to die by order of the queen. He said that he does not like the guy. His face darkened. Standing in front of him, the man noted that he had said everything, and now it was his turn, and then asked what he wanted. The brown-haired man mentally noted that everything was as he thought, and that this guy turned out to be crazy. Remembering the battle from the novel, he noted that there, at the behest of the Mad Queen, this commander staged a real massacre and met in a deadly duel with Xavier, who was trying to save people. The white-haired man barely defeated him, because then he had not yet given the master of the sword. Lying with an open wound on his chest, the knight noted that it would be better to die by his hand, and then asked to fulfill his last request. Looking with a thoughtful look, he asked to stop the queen. Studying Blank's face, the protagonist mentally noted that he was a natural-born straightforward warrior who immediately got to the point. He smiled slyly, thinking that he would not be deceived, so there was only one option. Lloyd threw his shovel over his shoulder and asked if he wanted to fight him. He said that if he won, he would join their construction troops, and if he won, he could immediately return to his kingdom. There was confusion in the man's eyes. He turned away and laughed, saying that he had seen through him because he could not refuse the offer, and then asked if he had planned this from the beginning. Frowning, the man said that, however, he had missed something. He asked if he really thought that he, the queen's support and stitches, would fight a civilian without a command. The guy rested his chin on his shovel, sarcastically noting that he had overlooked something. He said that the queen had entrusted him with command of the White Warriors, so this was not a request, but an order. The knight clenched his teeth in anger. The brown-haired man said with a sly expression that even if it was an order, simply waving a shovel could cast a shadow on the knight's honor, and then asked if it would be an honor for him to win in a wild duel. Blank reached for the sword on his chest and asked if he had a weapon. The protagonist picked up his shovel. Starting to approach him, the blonde noted that he heard that he punished traitors with this shovel, but for him in any case, it does not matter. At that moment, Lloyd mentally noted that he swallowed his bait, and now his chances of winning are 0. Imagining the blue sphere, he thought about the fact that he has triple rings, but their power is laughable, and he is a genius with a sword and almost finished off Xavier, and therefore he will never cope with him. Throwing the shovel over his shoulder, the guy mentally noted that, however, as always, he has a powerful trump card. Looking at him, the blonde said that since this was a duel between a knight and a commoner, the rules needed to be changed. Frowning, he said that if at least one attack from the brown-haired man made him move, he would win. A devilish smile appeared on the protagonist's face as he agreed to the terms. The knight perplexedly perked up. Lloyd decided to strike him 3 times. A powerful stream of fire forced the knight to jump aside. The fire continued. A moment later, he crashed into the top of a cliff. Blank covered his head with shock on his face. He saw a large hole on the top of the cliff. Trembling with fear, he turned around. The guy was lying powerlessly on the ground. He began to laugh wickedly. Thus, 500 enemies from the most elite unit of the Royal Road were retrained as builders of the frontier. The man angrily threw down the shovel. He approached his commander and exclaimed that no matter how much trust and power he had, such behavior was unacceptable. He loudly asked why they were digging up a battlefield where they were supposed to give their lives. Blank sighed heavily and replied that it was not just an order. He remembered the smug face of the brown-haired man who told him that swinging a shovel could be more kidney-like than swinging a sword. The commander stuck the shovel into the ground. After putting in some effort, he said that he wanted to test something, so he hoped for their support. Meanwhile, Lloyd and Xavier were standing on top of the mountain. Looking at the master, the warrior asked if this would really work. He responded by telling him that the orcs from the wasteland taught him this, so he was sure it would work. Smiling, he said that they just needed to wait. Looking at the workers on the mountainside, the brown-haired man noted that this would protect his gold mine. A monster's face made of stone began to appear on the mountain. Among the dense greenery, rare houses were visible. Inside one of them stood a large wooden mug. The table beneath it shook. A candlestick fell to the floor with a loud thud. 3 members of a family hugged each other in fear. A herd of monsters ran along the street. A local resident leaned his hands on the table. The other 2 men tried to support each other. A woman hugged a baby. It was noted that all the villagers were scared, but at the same time, many had one thought in their heads. The guy stepped on his foot. Among the trees, he saw a cloud of dust. Holding one phalanx, the brown-haired man threw the other over his shoulder. All those people hoped that he would save them. The warriors on horseback also saw a wall of dust. Blank frowned, thinking that at first he had doubts, but everything happened as he said. A herd of monsters ran through the forest. Trees broke under their hooves. Sitting at the table in front of the main character, he had previously asked if he had proof that there would be mastodons this time. Lloyd asked what he meant by proof. Opening his mouth in surprise, he asked in an iron mask, "Is it really not obvious?" The man pursed his lips, thinking that he was sure he had succeeded in the art of lying, but all his words came true. Putting the helmet on his head, he mentally noted that it would be better to prepare for battle rather than hesitate any longer. Imagining the battle scheme, the blonde thought that moving at the speed of their onslaught, they would deal with those at the head of the column. Then he decided that when they slowed down, they would immediately surround them and begin to attack. The man at the head of the military detachment thought that they could lose a maximum of 20 pawn. As he moved forward, the knight behind him said that as soon as this battle was over, he would go to his hometown and propose to his girlfriend. Another indignantly asked what kind of talk he was having. Imagining the bloody weapons, Blank thought that instead of an engagement ring, his girlfriend would only receive a spear that remained in his glory. He told himself that he should leave fear behind, because the lives of their cavalry depended on their determination. The man on horseback addressed the white warriors, telling them to prepare for an attack, but someone stopped him. He saw a man to his right. Bayern was looking at him, and the blonde asked him what he was doing here without his gear. Approaching the knight, the brown-haired man noted that the young gentleman said that he would not need it. Blank, was there something preceding this? The man said that he could not explain, but there must be a good reason for all this. The knight frowned when Bayern told him that he was here to move the signals for them. He wondered what they were talking about. The protagonist was standing on the top of the mountain, and the man asked if he could see him. The knight answered in the affirmative. The brown-haired man noted that the young gentleman would soon give a signal. Suddenly, Lloyd began waving 2 flags. Bayern, covering his eyes from the light, addressed the warriors. Seeing how the guy was waving blue flags, he said that they should move to the south of the village vice-chairman. And when he raised a blue and white flag, the man added that they should be faster. Blank looked at him and asked what kind of nonsense this was, noting that it was the same as opening a direct path to the village for the monsters. Imagining their current location relative to the village, the blonde said that it was a matter of time before they could break through the barrier. Then, imagining them in a different place, he indignantly asked him if he really thought that an attack from the side would work, and then shouted that of course it wouldn't. The protagonist began to twirl 2 flags, and the brown-haired man told them to repeat after him. Lloyd raised a white flag. When he waved it to the side, the man translated, telling them to move for the queen. Looking at Bayern, Blank loudly asked what just happened. The brown-haired man told him that everything was originally planned. Lloyd, with fury in his eyes, continued to wave the flags, mentally asking what they were thinking, and then exclaimed that there was no point in this. Meanwhile, the mastodons were approaching. The guy abruptly turned around. "I'll fly 2 flags up," he mentally shouted that they were already advancing. The monsters raced through the forest. They ran past the mountain where the brown-haired man was. He smiled slyly, thinking that the first step had been taken. The beasts still did not stop. They were heading straight for the figure of a large monster in the rock. Suddenly they slowed down. The mastodons began to fall, and the protagonist mentally answered that their sworn enemy, Megalania, stood on their own. The beasts began to crush each other, and Lloyd realized that the second step had been taken. He waved a white flag. At that moment, Bayern waved his hand and told the warriors to trot their horses. The horses began to move their hooves under the man's words that they should raise as much dust as possible. Then the men scraped their copies. Blank frowned, thinking that although he was following the instructions, he did not understand at all what he was doing. The mastodon stomped on the ground. The rest ran away from the Megalania. Pursing his lips, the brown-haired man mentally noted that they were afraid of the Megalania, and the horse axe made them think that even more lizards were moving here. The animals tried to figure out where to run. The protagonist realized that they would then move south. Frowning, the knight thought that they were moving. He wondered if this was the direction of the trenches that his soldiers had previously dug when they carved the lizard on the rock. Remembering how many men dug a trench, the blonde thought that back then he wondered why they were digging so much. The mastodons ran straight there, and Lloyd noted that this was the third step of his plan. The animals began to fall into the trench. A white flag appeared in the air. A giant hippo appeared in front of the pit. The guy frowned and shouted, telling him to pour water. A moment later, water poured out of the animal's mouth. The mastodons began to sink and howled loudly. The brown-haired man threw out the flags. He spread his arms in different directions. Blank, Bayern, and the knights watched him, after which a loud cry was heard that they had won. Under a loud cry, the wave washed away the mastodons. After a while, they began to get out onto dry land. Blank watched them from the hill. Nervously opening his mouth, he mentally noted that they really had won without even starting to fight. A guy squatted down next to him and noted that there was enough food for them here and they did not have to go back to where the Megalania was, and plus he was glad that they now had this channel. The blonde frowned and asked if the creation of this channel was part of the plan. The brown-haired man smiled slightly and replied that he would not call it a plan, because he just thought that since they were digging a trench, it could be used. The man pursed his lips. He mentally noted that they had lost 5 warriors during this battle. In front of him was a crying woman with a child. A knight was kneeling in front of her with a bloody weapon. The commander behind him said that he had fought with honor for the kingdom and its subjects. Looking at him with a darkened look, the blonde said that their soldiers in the kingdom of Magentana would always remember the knight Durando's brew. The woman fell to her knees. She bent over her husband's bloody weapon. After a while, Durando and the others were buried. Looking at the graves, their comrades cried. Turning around abruptly, Blank rudely asked how much longer they were going to waste time here and then sent them off to train. Then night fell. The man was kneeling in the rain in front of the cemetery of his former comrades. His face was emotionless. Staring ahead with empty eyes, he thought of courage and honor, mentally noting that these were the words he repeated to himself when he lost his warriors, but it was all nonsense. Trembling and hanging his head, Blank thought that deep down he already knew that death leaves behind far from honor. Remembering the grief-stricken widow, he thought that after death only hell awaits. The warriors raised their weapons. Embracing his comrade, the knight exclaimed that he must definitely invite them to his wedding. The blonde watched the joy of his comrades. Behind him stood Lloyd with Xavier, who asked the master